Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, July 29th, almost at the end of the month, almost at the end of the week. As a matter of fact, I was reminded as I closed out the show, and I think the thought occurred to me like seconds after saying it, and then I said, did I just say that? But I was reminded when I closed the show yesterday, I said that today would be the last show of the week, and probably it should be. I probably need more time tomorrow to get ready for the break, and taking the day off tomorrow would give me an ample opportunity to prepare new material for the break. So it's ironic that I will be taking time away from preparing new material for the break to give you new material before. Okay, well, you get the idea. At any rate, I think things are shaping up. I have some idea of how we'll deal with things. But time for us to do another of our live shows, and it is only Thursday. Today isn't planned currently as the last day of the week, but I can convince myself during the next 2 hours that it's a good idea. It's a regular Thursday. Greg Dworkin will be here to remind you that it is Thursday. We'll give him another shot at rounding up the news, and we'll think ahead to what's coming for the weekend, and I guess for the next 2 weeks as well. I don't know what's going on Twitter this morning. My eye went to Marjorie Trader Green tweeting a Bible verse for whatever reason. I'm not really sure why. You know what? I guess it doesn't really make any sense to try to figure out what would motivate Marjorie Trader Green to tweet a Bible verse. That could happen any day, randomly, for someone like her. I just happened to get a kick also out of the translation that she used, which I'm sure is widespread and frequently used and not at all unfamiliar to millions upon millions of Americans. I just happened to get a particular kick out of this translation, and it's what verse is this? I understand it to be Matthew. I think, and looking it up just to see what was up with this new translation, I happened to see that it was like Matthew chapter 25 verse, I don't know what, but it's a very famous one. And the translation that she's using is a more modern translation, much more, or I should say, much less stilted English. It's probably a better, translation for modern understanding. I think of this verse in what I guess is, what's the Saint, or the James, right, version of the Bible, right? At any rate, the old stilted English. This translation, for I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I think, we might traditionally remember as, for I was hungry and thou fed me, whatever it is. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you invited me in. This is the one that grabbed my eye. I needed clothes and you clothed me, which I recall as, I wast naked and thou clothed me, or whatever, And I was just wondering whether this was like an evangelical translation for like the please don't say naked in church crowd, or whether it was just, we're just modernizing the translation. I don't know if there was any particular problem with, I don't like when they say naked in my church. But anyway, she ends it with that. Yeah, I needed clothes and you clothed me, which I guess the modern thing is like, I needed clothes and thou wast my personal shopper, or something like that. I was sick and you looked after me. Then she puts a comma and then skips a line. And at the end, I was in prison and you came to visit me. And then there's little prayer hands, hashtag not forgotten, which I imagine this is all devotional stuff for her. But, I don't know whether that's supposed to be a thing. The QAnon people would say, why the extra carriage return, if you will, and we don't have carriages anymore, before I was in prison and you came to visit me. Is this a sign? Does she think she's going to prison? I don't know. It's just a typo. Just one of the many mysteries of trying to decode Marjorie Trader Green and her Twitter tappings. Anyway, just wondering what's going on there, and maybe some of you who are more attuned to evangelical practice can tell me. Maybe I did see yesterday that Greg was excited there was a new PRRI poll out. I doubt they polled this question, but it's entirely possible. We should have the PRRI polls for Talk Like a Pirate Day. That's what we really need. And when we can make that more relevant to us. All right. So that's going on. Also things, I guess, speaking of things that don't make any particular sense, also happened to see on Twitter, interview with a guy, I saw an article about it, an interview with a guy, all sorts of things, about a restaurant in, I think it was Huntington Beach, California. One of many now trying to put up signs that say, we'll only serve you if you can prove well, a lot of people who say only the unvaccinated can come to our place. This one says on the sign, you can only eat here if you can prove, if you have proof that you're unvaccinated. And that had, of course, a lot of people normal people scratching their heads. How do you prove you're unvaccinated? Apparently, the owner of the restaurant made a media tour yesterday. He has no more idea how to answer that question than I do, and it's his restaurant. So I happened to see him speaking with Chris Cuomo, I think, and just having not only no idea how to answer the questions, but just still sitting there belligerent and curmudgeonly and saying, of course you won't get it. You know, you're too stupid to understand kind of thing. And apparently he then did a follow-up interview with Laura Ingraham where he was celebrated as a hero, and they all laughed about how Chris Cuomo just couldn't grasp why, you know, how you were supposed to prove that you were unvaccinated. And, you know, the whole interview with Cuomo is the guy sitting there saying, well, let me ask you something. What if I ask you if you're vaccinated? Will you answer? And Cuomo says, yes. Well, are you vaccinated? Yes. Well, there you go. I mean, that's the essence of the interview. So I don't know. There we are. Greg is here. We'll turn to him next. I'll just let you know that there are people, Mighty OCD, for instance, speculating that maybe the Bible quote is part of their theme of the January 6th arrestees being political prisoners. And so, I don't know. In her mind, she's probably doing
That's
there. We go.
I don't know if you knew this, but there's
a
Patriots wing in federal prison.
Oh, that's good. They have a whole wing dedicated.
Yeah.
Why do we need such a large facility for our Patriots? It's weird. You'd think they'd stay out of jail.
You'd
Nope,
think, but
guess not.
you know, so that's what that's all about. That's why it ended with that, and that's what you meant by not forgotten.
Wonderful. I will now proceed to forget.
Yeah. Well,
Okay
I'd like
with
to
it.
forget about
I
her,
don't have
but you
to.
know.
Yeah.
Here's somebody you can forget about: George P. Bush. George
Yeah.
P. Bush went out of his
young
way
one.
to ingratiate himself with Donald Trump.
Yes.
And sucked up and threw his own family under the bus, and even had coffee koozies that said the one Bush that matters, or the one Bush that Trump cares about, or whatever. And of course, Trump endorsed his opponent, Ken Paxton, in the race for who could be the most corrupt Texas Attorney General in history.
Yeah. So that's it.
So that's where it gets you. And so I guess he's making his own bed and lying on it in it, or doing his own bid
He's
to wind
not
up in the
making his own
Patriot
bed.
wing. I don't know what he's doing, but it didn't work out for him. Too bad. I'm over it.
Yeah, okay, well, yeah, right. Nobody's upset about that. I guarantee one thing he's not doing is making his own bed, but I get the idea. Metaphorically speaking, something.
Metaphors are not forgotten.
Right.
Prayer symbol.
Right.
So let's talk infrastructure.
All right. Right.
We'll
Not
talk
forgotten.
politics. Let's
Not
talk about how the BIF became a BID, which is the bilateral infrastructure deal.
Oh.
Which in the end is a BFD.
Right. Damn. That's a lot of
Right.
All right. Got it.
So, you can't do Washington unless you do acronyms.
Right. True.
And acronyms.
NF.
So, they all
forgotten.
goes together.
Yes. Okay, so things are happening, and Kirsten Sinema is in the news again. Like I was wondering why she disappeared during all of this negotiation. And the answer,
She wants to make sure that
she was
everybody
being
knows she's a
brilliant.
player.
Yes, she was busy making it all happen, and now
Right, so she put a
Republicans
marker
say that
down
she did it.
when it comes to reconciliation, just like Joe Biden did, because, pay attention to me. So, fine.
Yeah, I don't really know whether she's.
If you're in the Senate, you can't get to be in the
telling us
Senate unless you have an
anything
incredible ego.
Yeah.
And having a win that's somehow credited to you in some fashion
that's the aim.
doesn't solve that issue
Oh no!
of what happens to your ego.
Oh no! It only makes it worse.
It only makes it worse. So
Okay.
Jake Sherman has a nice summary in Punchbowl which he kindly. This is the free version. The Punchbowl comes out 3 times a day. The midday and evening versions are subscription only.
Like one with
and
each meal.
The morning one anybody can read. And he tweeted the whole thing. And he made some very cogent observations. And I know that they're cogent because they mirror what we said on the show months ago. So
right.
What he said is they did it. How and what's next? Give him credit. The G10, the bipartisan infrastructure group of 10 senators in the White House, got an infrastructure proposal locked down on Wednesday, which meant they agreed to debate it.
No more lockdowns.
In the arcane world of the Senate, agreeing to debate something is a win because the alternative is not agreeing to debate it.
Right, and you don't want debate on the question of whether there's going to be one.
Yeah, exactly. So everybody understands that, right? And then they got a large majority to vote to advance it. In fact, 67. They got 17 Republicans to vote for it.
2/3.
Final passage could come at some point next week, a potentially huge breakthrough after weeks of intense negotiations that almost fell apart several times. So as we advised you, don't pay attention to it's working, it's not working. Steve Dennis, who's a great congressional reporter, had this really funny tweet, which I think he pinned now. Which said, here's how negotiations in the Senate go. No. Framework for infrastructure. No. Yes.
Framework.
So if you were following along, it's going to fall apart at any moment. Oh, this happened. Oh, that happened. Oh, Durbin is mad. Oh, now this guy's mad. Now Manchin is really mad. Now this one's mad. Oh, now Thune said none of his people vote. Okay, it passed with 17 Republicans.
Yeah.
So you could have skipped, as per our advice, all of the play-by-play that folks like Punchbowl and Politico live for.
Yeah.
Because they were completely unnecessary. And then get to the end and say, okay, so it passed. And which is the only thing that people are going to remember.
Yeah.
Now, that's not passage of the bill. It's just passage of, okay, now it moves.
That's
and
true.
The bill will probably be passed in the Senate. And it's not a law. It's only a bill, if you remember your Schoolhouse Rock. And then it goes to the House. And then lots of stuff can happen in the House, and everybody's going to be mad. Mm-hmm. And that's where the progressives are going to throw down their markers and say, no, you can't do this without us. And the Transportation Committee chair is going to say, you did this without me, and I'm really pissed, and I'm going to make my, And then, in the end, it's going to pass anyway, because here's the deal, and that's what Jake Sherman was going on about. How did this happen? Joe Biden wanted it. Biden and Senator Caputo weren't able to get there. Capito.
Oh, yes, right, okay.
When a president leans in and empowers competent and focused staff, generally things happen.
All right.
Which is true. We said that. It's very hard for a party to vote against its own president when its own president really wants something.
Okay, feels right.
And so that's what happened here, basically. So you could skip all the Sturm und Drang. You could go right to the end and say, okay, well, eventually he's going to get what he wants. Now, Senator Rob Portman is a lame duck. He wanted it too. Being a lame duck, Portman had a little more freedom to operate than other Republicans. So Portman met on Tuesday night for more than 6 hours with Steve Ricchetti, a top Biden White House aide, to hammer out some details. And Manchin demanded it, and without them, there was no path. And then he highlights, we all scoffed at, or doubted at least, the dual-track strategy, bipartisan infrastructure with partisan reconciliation, devised by Senator Schumer in the White House, and it still may not work, but it is the only possible solution. It's on track for the moment. Mm-hmm. And the G10 made it work.
Okay.
So we talked about Sinema, Manchin, and Portman. The other 4 Republican senators, Collins, Murkowski, Romney, and Cassidy, all voted to impeach former President Trump, which shows they're ready to buck their party if needed. And Collins and Murkowski also voted for several of Biden's nominees. Tester will do his own thing. Warner has been yearning to be a bipartisan dealmaker his entire tenure in the Senate. He probably hates Kirsten Sinema right now because she's getting all the attention that he wanted. Maggie Hassan may have as much political need for this deal as anybody in the Senate. And so the unique dynamics of the group, both personally and politically, helped make this happen, whereas Thune and Barrasso, the number 2 and number 3, voted no, with McConnell voting yes, and they both have an eye on being a future leader.
Yeah.
I think McConnell voted yes. He didn't specifically say that. McConnell said he was going to.
Yeah.
And John Cornyn voted no. So everybody who wants to be leader is going the Kevin McCarthy route, is saying, I can't possibly agree to something that will help Democrats, so I will be on record as voting no, even though we know we have the votes, so it's not going to cost me.
Yes, right. No one can blame him for stopping it, so there you go.
Of the 17 GOP votes, yes, 3 aren't running for re-election, 7 just won re-election, and 5 are up for re-election in 2022, including Murkowski.
Okay, but that describes 2/3 of the Senate.
Yeah. So, which 2/3 of the Senate voted, So the bottom line here is Biden wanted this, and his own party wasn't going to say no in the end.
Yes, that's right.
If you have somebody who's relatively competent negotiating with you, isn't it Jimmy Carter? And as much as we love Carter, especially post-presidency, he was awful about trying to get along with his own party. He was terrible, and that's in fact why his ratings dropped. The only way your ratings can drop, as we learned in a very partisan environment like we have now, and look at Trump's, is for your own party to abandon you. That's what happened to Carter at one point, and that's how come his ratings were so low, and that's why he wasn't reelected. So you have to get along with your own party. But if you do that competently, you're going to get what you want eventually. And that's really the message here. And that's something we said on the show months ago. Okay, they're going to do this. Why are they going to do this? Because they think they can. Biden wants this. It's probably going to happen in some form. The question isn't whether it's going to happen. It's, is it any good when it does? That's a different issue.
Yes.
Right now, you just take the W. It's a win.
Yeah. All right. Where shall I?
And who gets the loss? Donald Trump, who said, "I'm going to stop this."
Right. That's true. And spent the day pressuring Republicans in the Senate not to cooperate, and so
and he got 17 votes out of the Republicans by doing so.
Yeah.
And that there was also the Texas special election where his handpicked candidate lost 2 days ago. And so a lot of Trumpy people got really upset when I said this on Twitter. Oh, what a stupid tweet. But I tweeted yesterday, between what happened with the bipartisan, the BFD bipartisan deal, and the loss in Texas 6, I think it was, for Trump's handpicked candidate. These are baby steps. But, maybe he's not really the boss of the Republican Party that everybody thinks he is.
Well, how could that not be a
what a terrible tweet. Oh, you don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, right.
It bothered you, but yeah.
Loser
right.
L.
And
he lost the election.
Right.
And by the way, that election loss happened to have come with a lot of trauma and violence. And that's the next topic that we're going to wind up talking about.
I just wanted to keep that in mind because he very frequently continues to claim that he has a 100% record of his endorsed candidates winning. And, it's never been true, but he just keeps saying it's one of those things. So,
well, he has a 100% record for lying.
That's certainly true.
Right. So Larry Tribe found this picture of a Steve Bannon podcast. All hell is going to break loose tomorrow. Just understand this. All hell is going to break loose tomorrow. It's going to be moving. It's going to be quick. That's January 5th.
Right. I remember that one.
2021. Steve Bannon said the day before the insurrection.
Right.
And Tribe said the idea that Trump didn't know about this, if Bannon did.
Well, he would never. That'd be interesting because on the stand, you could probably get him to do one of those things. Is it true that you didn't know about it?
Steve Bannon.
He did.
Steve Bannon doesn't have executive privilege.
Right. Oh, that's true too. But I'm just thinking about Trump would never accept the idea that someone knew something that he didn't.
Oh, well, did Steve Bannon tell him? Well, why don't you just
not.
subpoena Steve Bannon rather than subpoenaing Trump?
We could do that. It's just you have to look at him if you do that.
Put
a bag over his head. That'd be fine.
This is what staff work is all about. We talked about staff work the other day.
Oh, yeah. Let the staff look at him.
Let the staff look at him. You're hired to look at Steve Bannon, so I don't have to.
No.
In fact, you're hired to talk to him, so I don't have to.
My eyes are melting like the hot tub.
Right, exactly.
All right. Well,
like in Raiders of the Lost Ark. So what happens is that we have these hearings, and it turns out a lot of people watch them, and they're still talking about it. And it was basically the talk of cable all day yesterday, and it did matter. And another thing that happened is that Michael Fanone, one of the cops who testified, makes the rounds and talks about such things as them getting death threats, fairly racist ones. But also he made another point that was followed up by a reporter from the Daily Beast the title of this piece is, "This was the biggest, loudest cop union in America, and then came January 6th. The Fraternal Order of Police had denounced the attack on the Capitol, but that's not the whole story. In fact, they went radio silent a few days later after the Republicans coalesced on the strategy of don't say anything and pretend it didn't happen.
Yeah.
Because they're they're like the Chamber of Commerce. They're as bipartisan as the Chamber of Commerce is.
Yeah. Right. Well, we don't take positions because we're just policing America. Right. Sure. Okay.
Yeah. We don't take any position. We just happen to support the Republicans and believe in Stop the Steal. And our members were like, part of the rioters.
Right.
So the fact that some of our other members got hurt, well, basically we're not going to say anything about that.
Oh, maybe that's it. We have to stay neutral because we had
because there were good people on both sides.
Right.
I mean, they have no choice, right? Because there were good people on both sides. So given this track record, says the article, Michael Fanone, one of the many cops who fended off rioters at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, said he expected the largest police union in the country, the Fraternal Order of Police, to come out strongly in defense of him and his fellow officers. The cops who stared down violent pro-Trump mobs that day have not only had to deal with their own physical and emotional injuries, but have also endured criticism from Republican lawmakers, hostile civilians, and even efforts by the former president to downplay the seriousness of the January riot, which is part of what the hearings were to establish on Tuesday, that, in fact, all of that's BS, and they did it beautifully, and people know that. But in an interview in CNN Wednesday, Fanone, fresh from testifying, said he received no outreach from the union immediately after January 6th, even though the D.C. Metro cop had been a dues-paying member since he first became a police officer. It wasn't until 6 months after the riot he spoke to the president, Patrick Yost, to voice his concern about a lack of support. I'll be honest with you, he said to CNN. I wasn't particularly impressed with that conversation. I was extremely disappointed. And among the things Fanone was visibly pissed about was he described what he described as the FOP's, Fraternal Order of Police's, failure to marshal institutional support on behalf of the officers who defended the Capitol. And again, it goes on to chronicle, the lack of, if you want to prove that you weren't vaccinated, I don't know if you could do that, but you could certainly prove that these guys didn't really back the blue. Yeah. And the fact that the Republicans are in this situation where they're now clearly not backing the blue is going to hurt them, and they know it. And that's one of the reasons why they hated the fact that of their own making, because they refused the offer to be a 50-50 participant in a select commission. We wound up having a select committee where they really have no say.
Yeah.
And so they made their silly before the hearings press conferences that you talked about yesterday, but afterwards, nobody really cares what they have to say.
Good.
You haven't heard them. There aren't a lot of things that, we heard that and we hate these cops. What are you going to come out and say?
Yeah, I don't know. They seem to be stuck with that. That is interesting that they fell silent, because there's an easy position even for the union. Yeah, I mean, I understand they had members on both sides, but only one of them was working at the time, right? So it's a work
only
issue.
One of them was getting beaten.
Well, that's true. But yeah, even if you can't bring yourself to take sides on that, someone was. They only make a big deal about who's on the job and who's not, and things that happen in the line of duty. But
right.
All of a sudden,
so one of the attempts
so
to say something was by Jim Banks, one of the guys who was kicked off the committee.
Oh, what did he attempt to say?
What happened to these officers should never have happened, and it should never happen again. And if I were there, I'd be asking the question, why was the Capitol unprepared and vulnerable to attack on January 6th? And why would Speaker Pelosi want to block me from asking that question? And Arthur Delaney at Huffington Post said, we're supposed to pretend nobody's ever asked that question, even though it's the first question everybody asks. Yeah. And it was the exclusive subject of a bipartisan multi-committee Senate investigation that held several public hearings, and then he gave a reference to the actual Senate investigation. And we made the point yesterday when we were talking to the guy who has experience as being a investigative staffer, is you do not have to reinvent the wheel. When somebody's already done an extensive report, you just incorporate that into the mosaic, the way he put it, rather than redoing it. And so that's the answer to Jim Banks' question. Why didn't you ask that question? Because it's been answered. Oh, yeah. And by the way, the exclusive responsibility, because of the wacky way that America works, for the D.C. National Guard is the President of the United States.
Oh, that's it? There's no. I thought there would be something.
Pelosi has no ability to call in the D.C. National Guard.
No, she doesn't represent D.C. or anything like it.
Right? So Delaney goes out to say, for any Republican members of the House who actually care about the answer to the question why the Capitol was so vulnerable, reading this report might be a good start. Klobuchar, Blunt, Peters, Portman released bipartisan report from the official U.S. Senate Committee on Rules and Administration.
Right. Well, no House Republican is going to be interested in what Senate Democrats had to say. But
right. So why were they so unprepared? Because U.S. Capitol police officers have never had riot training. Possibly because nobody's ever incited a mob attack on the Capitol before.
Yeah, right. They're fine with dealing with, I guess, British forces. Back in the day, they were like, well, if the British come to burn the place down, we'll be prepared the second time. But yeah, that's true. They did discuss that in the days right after, that there had been some riot training, just not all of their forces were trained. And then, of course, there was the question of, well, all right, those of you who were riot trained, why did you lock your gear in a bus and park it a mile away? That's a good question.
And then when you call for backup, how come the backup never came? And right. Yes, those questions have been asked and not fully answered. And so the ones that have been answered aren't going to be asked again. The ones that haven't been answered are the ones that people are going to look at. Well, what about Antifa? Well, that's not one of the questions that really is pertinent to this particular investigation.
Right, true. Exactly.
Well, why did we invade Iraq under false pretenses? Well, that's a really interesting question that has nothing to do with this particular investigation.
Nah, you should try asking that. Say, that guy's question didn't have anything to do with it either. Why don't I get to ask mine?
Yeah, exactly right. So, what I'm trying to do is illustrate the fact that the Republicans really are in a bind here because the coverage, again, I'll remind you, this is not surprising either. Many of those reporters were in that building on that day. Yeah. And they've got their own PTSD stuff, and they've got their own issues here, but they're not just letting this go. And people like Delaney and other reporters are saying, look, you're asking a question that has an answer. Now what about the questions that the committee's answering? Well, that's not the kind of press I wanted. Well, then you should have been on the committee.
I guess so. And you should have behaved yourself so that you could get there. Well, all right, we'll be right back with more such questions. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning. I have good news to report. Many more listeners like you are making critical contributions that keep our show on the air. Makes good sense, of course, and patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple. Now you can make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for helping keep you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all of your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netflix Radio. Greg Dworkin's still with us. Where do we leave off? We were just saying about how difficult the position was that the Republicans have put themselves in.
Yeah, and there's an event that happened. We touched on it on the show yesterday, but I sent you some video afterwards that you had a chance to see. And since you understand the rules better than I do, I thought maybe I'd get you to talk about it. But what happened is Representative Clyde from Georgia,
Andrew Clyde,
who is the person who said that, you saw all these misleading videos. They were just a bunch of tourists on that day. And then, of course, we had Tuesday morning come up. And on that same day, after Jamie Raskin had participated and talked to and seen the videos and discussed it with the officers who were testifying, Raskin at the Rules Committee had a chance to discuss with Representative Clyde what he had said about just tourists and tried to get Clyde to, if not apologize, at least retract the statement or strike it from the record or whatever it is he wanted to do, which was a remarkable back and forth that I wasn't sure how it actually happened, but maybe you can describe what happened and how it was allowed.
Yeah. Well, what ended up happening was Raskin confronts Clyde over his stupid statement about the tourists, and Clyde thinks that taken in full context, that his statement not only makes sense, but that everyone ought to believe, the core truth of it. And the kernel of truth that's in there is, if you slice it just right, then Clyde thinks he was saying, well, if you look only at this particular bit of video, there's a snippet of video of rioters inside the Capitol crypt and or in the rotunda, I guess, and there's stanchions and velvet ropes there that control the normal tourist crowd. And at this point, there was no confrontation going on. The cops had removed themselves to elsewhere after the battle, and people were milling about in this area and walking inside of the velvet ropes. And he was saying, he's like defending himself by saying, well, if you really look at what I said was, if you just look at this instead of all this other video, you would not be able to tell that it wasn't just a normal tourist visit. Well, that's true. If you look at video from earlier in the day when no one was there yet, it just looks like a normal day, right? Okay, so as far as that goes, that's a true statement. But of course, Raskin was like, well, the reason your statement was interesting to anybody was that you were talking about that there was a riot going on, but it was really just tourists. Anyway, your question was, why did Raskin get to go after Clyde like that and question him about that? And so the procedural answer is this, like you said, happened in the Committee on Rules. The Committee on Rules at the time, yesterday, was considering and writing rules for the consideration of a couple of appropriations bills. So this is the boring stuff. They were considering the Department of State Foreign Operations and Related Programs Appropriations Act, the Commerce, Justice, Science, and Related Agencies Appropriation Act, and the Legislative Branch Appropriations Act. Although I think that one was actually a different day. And then another one, which is, again, it's a list of the various agencies that they were doing. And Andrew Clyde had a couple of amendments that he wanted considered along with these bills. And they were stupid amendments. We shouldn't make any mistake about that. He was also there in support as a co-sponsor of, a giant raft of anti-abortion amendments, that they always trying to add to this thing. His amendment, in case you were wondering, was that he had an amendment that would force the agencies to force as many of their federal workers to work in the office in person under the, in the new fiscal year, as were working there before COVID. So he wants to, he would defund,
in the middle of a Delta wave.
Right. He would defund agencies if they allowed remote work at a higher rate than they allowed it before COVID. That's his genius amendment. So, okay. Well, they didn't even bother with that. But anyway, he was there.
So he was
as a
trying
witness
to work against work from home, otherwise known as WFH, which is a BFD, which is a translation of what the hell are you doing in the middle of a Delta wave?
Yeah. So, it was a dumb thing to do, and it was a stunt to begin with. So he was there in support of his stupid stunt amendment, which had no chance. But the reason why Raskin was able to go after him like this, even about something that's irrelevant to what the Rules Committee was working on, is at that time, Raskin was sitting as a member of the Rules Committee, and Clyde was there as a witness in support of his stupid amendment. So when he was called up as a witness, well, now the committee gets to ask questions of the witness and gets to reclaim its time, and all of that sort of stuff.
And so Raskin gets to say, look, I was just at a very emotional, difficult 4.5 hours or so of testimony, and why are you such a jerk?
Basically, yeah. And
tell the committee why you're such a jerk. Now, I'll give you the opportunity to revise
and you wouldn't do that.
Retract your statement so that you don't come across as a jerk. No, I really am a jerk. I stand by everything I said.
Absolutely.
Why are you such a jerk? Well, because you didn't take it in context. Well, I'm looking at the entire statement and you're still a jerk. Why are you a jerk? Just answer the question.
Yeah. And what it comes down to there, he was right. Clyde was right in the sense that he was, this doesn't really have anything to do with my amendment or the bill at hand, but it doesn't, but that's the committee members' prerogative. They ask whatever they want. It's my
prerogative to note for the record that you are a jerk. Now, why are you a jerk? Answer the question.
Right. And he wouldn't, and that made an even larger point, which for the Democrats who dominate the Rules Committee is jerks won't get their amendments included.
Right. Well, and to me, the bigger question or point that was made is that it's just yet another example of how the Republicans have been on the defense about this since Tuesday morning when that hearing took place. It really changed the tenor of everything, and that's what allowed Raskin to even be in the situation to be asking that. Otherwise, I'm not sure it would have come up at that particular point in time, or if it had, nobody would cover it.
That's right.
So
that was the reason why Raskin
it did in this video, and it's circulating, and that's all part of the fact that Republicans really don't have good answers, and they don't want this investigation because it's just going to get worse for them every day, and they know it. And so that's the one side of that. You have the bilateral infrastructure framework, the BIF, becoming a bilateral infrastructure deal, a BID, a BFD. It really is Infrastructure Week. So you have that. You have the hearings. It's really been a bad week so far, and it's only Thursday for Republicans. And, you also have noise in other areas. Yeah, Kirsten Sinema's throwing down her marker about I'm a player, don't ignore me when it comes to reconciliation.
Yes.
Manchin did the same thing, but it didn't stop what was going on. Manchin did the same thing with voting rights, and it turns out Manchin has been working on a Manchin version of the Voting Rights Act, which may actually, in the end, allow for a carve-out for the filibuster to get that thing passed, and it may do as much or as good as any of the H.R. 1 and some of the other stuff that was sitting out there that was going to be filibustered. So that's still out there. It's still possible. And you put all of that together and you look and you say, Republicans are not having a great week, and Biden's getting what he wants. It's a really good week for Democrats. Mm-hmm. And sure, you could make this into a Dems in disarray thing, as Politico and Axios and Punchbowl do for a living.
There's money in it.
But the fact is, they're doing all right. And part of it is the moderates that everybody has questions about. I was thinking to myself, this isn't actually going to go this way, but I was thinking to myself, I could just imagine, how would Harry Reid have handled the situation where Chuck Schumer had to do a bipartisan deal to satisfy Manchin, Sinema, Mark Warner, and a bunch of other Democrats who let Manchin and Sinema be the lightning rods, and then come up with a partisan reconciliation that would satisfy Bernie and a whole bunch of other Democrats, Ed Markey and others. And so Chuck Schumer did this, and so far, as Jake Sherman points out, it's the only way to do it. And so far, it's on track, as also Jake Sherman points out. And I'm thinking to myself, how would Harry Reid have done this? And then I remembered back in the day when you and I were going to Netroots Nation that Harry Reid wasn't always beloved.
That is true.
And there were plenty of progressives who were really mad at him. And I was just thinking, like 10 years down the road, are we going to be in a situation where people said, well, it's not that I loved him, but at least Chuck Schumer got stuff done.
Yeah,
thinking,
probably.
Nah, people don't like Chuck Schumer. That's never going to
Well, yeah, he's certainly, he's got a long track record of, he spent more time in front of the cameras, and that helps people.
That was his famous thing.
Way. Yeah.
No more dangerous place in Washington than if you are between Chuck Schumer and a camera.
That's right. And now there are more dangerous places in Washington.
Now there are. It turns out being in the Capitol and trying to do your job is more dangerous.
Yeah.
And so if he were outside at the cameras, he'd probably be safer than if he was in the, on the Senate floor.
Right.
But, are people going to look back and say, well, that Chuck Schumer, he's a pain in the butt, but at least he got stuff done.
Yeah.
Because you know what? He's getting stuff done.
And I thought the question was going to come around to, how would Reid have done it differently? And
how would Reid have done
it? He would not have done it differently. It would largely have been the same. It just would have been him instead of Chuck Schumer. And some people react to him differently than Schumer, but not always and not by much. It probably would have gone the same way. And we would have said the same things.
Yeah, exactly. So just keep that in mind when you say, but look, the bilateral infrastructure deal isn't the best deal that's ever been written. There's a lot of stuff in there you won't like, and there's stuff that isn't in there that you wanted to be in there.
Yeah.
But the point is, it got passed, and that's nearly impossible these days. And so you really have to step back and say, okay, that was pretty amazing that it got passed.
Yes. Well, the point will be
again, as Jake Sherman, as we started the whole segment, how did it happen? It happened because Biden wanted it.
Yeah.
Why did Biden want it? I don't know if he loved it, but he knew that Sinema and Manchin wanted it, and he couldn't get everything else unless they came along.
Yeah.
And so it's so far going the way that they kind of mapped out.
Okay. Well, seems like they've drawn maps before, I guess.
Right. Does that make Joe Manchin the greatest thing since sliced bread? In his mind, sure. In our mind, he is who he is, and he's always been. And so he's going to surprise you by coming along with stuff because he does that most of the time. He just has to do it his way, and you just have to hold your nose and let him do it.
Mm-hmm. Well, that thing makes me think of the Stephen Dennis tweet that you were talking about. That most people recognize the same principle in the old joke about whenever you're looking for something you've lost, right? It's always in the last place you look, right?
Yeah.
All of these places that we looked for it wasn't there, and the deals won't happen until they do. And every answer on negotiations, except for the final answer, is a no. Every negotiation involves 99% no and just one yes. How terrible is that?
So rather than do it from memory, I'm actually going to send you the tweet, and it's pinned, so it's easy to find. But how deals come together in Congress. No. Yes to framework. No. Yes.
Yeah, and I think he had another version.
Absolutely
of it
true.
At one point, where they there was another version of it earlier that I saw. The same thing. No. Yes, and then but it had a guide to it. It said "You are here," and it had a red box around one of the no's, really close to the yes.
Yeah.
But now it reminds me. Don't we have to grab the sound clip? That no yes is isn't that the song from Blazing Saddles, right?
Absolutely.
No.
Because Madeline Kahn is like the greatest thing since sliced bread. So anything she does is hysterical. But in this particular case, absolutely. And then the other thing that you should do if you're going to revise it is you have that picture and you have one of those little arrows that you were talking about. But Politico on maybe the third of 17 no's is pointing to it and says scoop.
Yes, right. Always
or breaking or exclusive.
Right. What it means, it's going to say in the next paragraph. It means that they're saying no, but about to say yes.
But we're pessimistic, but you never know.
Phew. All right. So good. They've gotten the yes, but remember we're only yes on a motion to proceed, right? So
the
debate
but
begins.
to think that these are what you call these test votes.
Right.
If you don't pass that, you don't go anywhere.
They didn't pass it last week.
Big effing deal that you got on a motion to proceed.
Yes. And now, of course, they will, without any irony whatsoever, all the people who said last week, how can I vote yes when we don't know what's in the deal and how it's been finalized, will this week say, well, we haven't finalized things and we don't know finally what's in the deal, but we're going to work it out now because we've agreed to have that debate. Which
we've agreed to agree.
Last week. But that was, no, you're an idiot last week. Now you're a genius because you're a senator who said it, not a dumb blogger.
Yeah, exactly right. Here's a couple of other headlines I just wanted to get in that give you an idea what kind of week Democrats are having. This is from the New York Times. Pandemic aid programs spur a record drop in poverty. Most comprehensive study yet of the federal response to the pandemic shows huge but temporary benefits for the poor and help frame a larger debate over the role of government. And so now, basically, talking about Republicans being on the defensive, what you're going to see is a bunch of op-eds that say poverty drop, but that's not what we want.
Oh, yeah, right. Artificial, and besides, they were cheating to get out of poverty. We're going to put them right back in there where they belong.
This one from the Washington Post along the same lines. Again, Republicans on the defensive. Dems in disarray. States that cut unemployment early aren't seeing a hiring boom, but who gets hired is changing. States that scale back unemployment aid have seen a decline in teen unemployment and an increase in workers over 25. So basically you have these jobs at McDonald's.
Yeah.
And, when things are tough, your summer teen who would work there is now replaced by your 45-year-old, I need a job.
Yeah, that's super exciting, and everyone loves to see that when you do make a stop in McDonald's for something to eat. It's really inspirational. I prefer when the teens are there. Thank you.
Yeah. So, but that's happening. So the economy grew in the last quarter something like 6.5%. And again, the Republicans are having a hard time saying Biden's terrible, awful, the worst thing because, the economy's growing and poverty's dropping and he's getting his infrastructure bill passed and Trump-loving unions are going to get jobs. And so maybe there'll be Biden-loving unions because they, after all, a lot of them voted for him. And so, you have all of that. Meanwhile, Politico has the McConnell's Herschel Walker problem story.
Does he have one?
Oh, yeah.
So. All right.
McConnell wants to flip the chamber, but one potential obstacle keeps coming up. The candidates are terrible on the GOP side.
Okay. Yeah.
Take Georgia, while Trump is all but begging NFL. I'm the one who said it's terrible. A Political Playbook didn't say that.
Oh, well,
Multiple Donald Trump-inspired candidates who might sweep their GOP primaries go on to lose in the general election is how they describe it. The way I describe it is they have a bunch of terrible candidates.
Yeah,
Take Georgia,
while
Trump is all but begging NFL legend Herschel Walker to run against Raphael Warnock.
Good.
McConnell views Walker's complicated personal history as a vulnerability. A recent AP story detailed Walker's record of threatening and violent behavior, including allegedly holding a pistol to his then-wife's head and threatening to blow her effing brains out.
Is that bad?
And Walker has spoken openly about him having dissociative identity disorder.
All right.
So Josh Holmes, the GOP leader's political right-hand man, tweeted a link to the article writing, "This is about as comprehensive a takedown as I've ever read, my lord."
Oh. Huh. All right. Well, I guess, they want him out of the way.
So he does have a Herschel Walker problem. But their troubles don't stop with the Peach State. By the way, Walker doesn't live in Georgia. That's another problem.
Oh.
But their troubles don't stop with the Peach State. In Missouri, former Governor Eric Greitens is hugging Trump's big lie about the 2020 election for Roy Blunt's seat.
When Eric Greitens hugs you. Holy cow.
Yeah, in Pennsylvania, Republicans are similarly worried about the crop of GOP hopefuls looking to succeed Pat Toomey. None of the major Republican candidates have ever been elected to public office. Every one of them lags behind the race's top Democrats in fundraising. In Arizona, Mark Kelly is in a good position, as the former president vows never to endorse Doug Ducey. Several Trumpian mini-me's jump into the race. So what to do? Here's where it gets interesting. They're having a fight between let's put our finger on the scale and make sure we don't get any more Todd Akins, which is the McConnell view.
Yeah.
And don't do that because you guys always are on the wrong side, which is Rick Scott's position, and he chairs the National Republican Senatorial Commission comment thing.
Right.
And he has
He's
no
a
intention
Florida
of
man.
meddling in 2022's primary. So he's not putting his finger on the scale because back in the day, the NRSC endorsed his opponent. And he's still pissed about it.
And well, they were right, and probably
they were right,
better.
but these guys do everything on the basis of quality and data and their personal feelings, and retribution have nothing whatsoever to do with it.
Yeah. All right. Well, good. Put Florida man in charge. I hope it works out for you. And I'm looking down the column here. We skipped over the opportunity to mention Christine O'Donnell, whose name appears right before Todd Akins.
Again, I mention all of this because my basic theme the past couple of days is stop ceding 2022 House to Republicans.
Yeah.
They've got plenty of issues of their own. Yeah, we have a redistricting issue.
Oh, yeah.
But Biden passing stuff and being in charge and being the president and being an incumbent a lot, and the Republicans screwing up, and Kevin McCarthy being Kevin McCarthy, and this January 6th stuff, and the pandemic, and with Ron DeSantis's brilliant leadership now allowing Florida to lead the nation in COVID cases
by far.
It's a big deal. Now, a few words about the pandemic.
All right.
It's not clear when this latest wave will peak and then drop. In the UK, it's dropping relatively quickly, it seems. And a vaccinated peak is different than an unvaccinated peak, and we're halfway there. And whereas halfway there is bad long term, because it helps, you couldn't pick a better situation to allow the virus to mutate and then natural selection allowing the worst versions of it to develop. Nonetheless, half the population being vaccinated means we're not going to go back to what it was, 6 months ago when things were just absolutely awful and everything had to shut down. But you are going to have, as they like to say in Washington, mask directives. That's the new word. Everything is a directive. Nothing's a mandate.
I see.
Mandates are bad. Directives are good. I'm not mandating that you get vaccinated before you come to work. I'm directing you to.
I guess so. God, if you don't like it, there's the direction.
And
of
if
the
you
door.
don't like it, there's the direction you could take your directive.
Pretty much. Okay.
But it's not a mandate.
Yeah, I think we're going to have one here. Yes. And I don't know, our own local spike in Delta variant happens to coincide with about a week or two after the gigantic angry turnouts at the Board of Education things over critical race theory.
Oh, that was last week's worry.
Yeah, but and the age of coronavirus, last week's worry becomes next week's hospitalizations. So.
Yeah, exactly. And so this is one of the ways that the pandemic is completely upending Republican strategy. Just as you probably don't remember the caravans that elected Ed Gillespie governor in your state, you may no longer recognize critical race theory as being the driving force that's getting everybody sick.
Yeah, that's possible. Although
I mean, that's just going to move on, and it'll be something else next week. So these things don't have staying power, whereas the January 6 hearings do, because there's going to be more of them. More revelations are going to come out. None of it's going to be good for Republicans. They know it, and that's one of the many reasons why they've been on the defensive all week. So that's my segment for today.
Okay.
I want to throw this in, too, because I didn't want to forget it. And this was just horrible. But there was a account of a St. Louis, and I can't read it anymore. It's one of these newsletters that only lets you read it once, and then they demand that you subscribe.
Oh, maybe I'll read it.
But I'll send it to you so you could read it.
And then I will
and basically, a naturalized citizen, non-blue-eyed white guy is the St. Louis County Health Director.
Well, that can't be good.
He's actually from Southeast Asia.
I see.
His name is Dr. Faisal Khan, Khan.
Khan.
So, might be Pakistani. You don't know. And he tried to make the case for why people should be wearing masks. And people on the council started insulting him and where he was from and the fact that he wasn't American and why are we listening to you? It was just horrible.
Yeah, that sounds pretty bad.
Absolutely horrible. Couldn't be more racist.
Good job.
And, this is what the public health people have to put up with when they're trying to save your lives. And he said that. I'm just a public health guy trying to save your life. I've worked in many different countries, and, I've never had my origin questioned. Mm-hmm. But it's not about that. It's about, COVID and Delta. And, and basically they were saying things along the lines of, well, we want to hear from an American.
Okay. Yeah, well, that is pretty rotten. Do you think it's worth using my one read to read through it? All right, well, we'll do that.
Yeah, because I can't, so,
Right, so we'll take up your task here and handle it for you. How about that?
So there it is. Anyway, wow. Yeah, but you'll be horrified. It's just horrifying.
Well, I was already horrified by the news out of St. Louis that they, voted to, prohibit mask mandates in the future, et cetera. Right? They're the epicenter of the Delta spike, and they were pressured by the crowds turning out screaming at them like they were out last week and the week before screaming about critical race theory. At some point, the participants in these crowds will be too sick to show up as part of the next crowd, and I'm looking forward to that day. All right, well, I'll read this through for you, and all right, we can wrap things up now. This reminds me of
take a look at it during the break and see whether it's worth reading a little bit after the hour. In the meantime, I'll be back on whenever.
Because we're gone for like 2 weeks now as we go around. I tour the world trying to contract coronavirus from elsewhere.
Where are you going this time?
We're going to Costa Rica, which, they have some coronavirus too.
Yeah.
But we were going to go there 2 years ago or a year ago, and they said nobody is allowed in, and we'll let you come next year. And then they said, we'll let you in this year, and it's your last chance because all your money goes away unless you come. All right.
Yeah, not only that, but, you have to go. But we're not guaranteeing we're going to let you out. So we'll see what happens.
Well, yeah, and it'll be very interesting to see how they deal with things. But apparently, we'll be wearing masks anyway, so. And then we'll go out in the wilderness and walk around where there's nobody. And I guess if sloths don't have it, we're in good shape.
Right. Alrighty, so take care and have a great trip. Thank you. We'll wind up talking to you in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, when things happen again.
Yep. Okay.
All right. Take care. Thanks, Greg. And
Bye.
Thanks for the recommendation. I'll take a look at this piece in the next couple minutes. And then over the 1 minute break, I'll speed read it and see whether we can mentally handle the torture he was subjected to. Sounds bad. All right. Well, let's see. I don't think there's much else we can squeeze in the minute or so that we've got. Oh, and it sounds like your connection has fallen apart and making beeps and bloops anyway. So you don't even have to bother waiting to disconnect until later. Oh, well, the beep stopped anyhow. All right. Let's see. One of the things I want to get to, I do have that Washington Post piece that's trying to examine what's going on in Britain and put some reason to why cases appear to be falling. And I would like to review that as well because they're very cautiously. This is the most cautiously optimistic I've ever seen anybody. One country seems to be getting through it. Is it a model for our ability to get through it? And it's not entirely clear that that's the case. Also coming up, I guess, after the break, the Daily Beast's account of the day that mask mandates or directives, whatever you want to call them, returned to Congress. I told you yesterday that there was a second group of Republican congressmen hopelessly floundering around looking to sue Nancy Pelosi about the fines that they received for not wearing masks on the House floor. And then yesterday they brought masks back to the House floor, and apparently that included such mature and adult-like activity as Lauren Boebert being offered a mask by a floor staffer and taking it and throwing it back in their face. So that sounded like it really went well. And she's being real mature, Lauren. That was really nice. And by the way, of course, you'll recognize Lauren Boebert as carrying forward the armed society is a polite society adage, unless, of course, they are not polite and they choose instead to bully low-paid staffers instead, and I guess under threat that they'll also shoot them if they actually protest the poor treatment. So anyway, we'll have lots of stories about things like that, and then lots of stories about other little itty-bitty things that don't matter so much, but that might give you some joy to take with you into your Thursday afternoon. We'll take our 1-minute break and be back after this with those stories and more, depending on what catches my eye and pocket in the next 60 seconds. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Networks Radio. No idea whether the mute button was working properly. Hope we didn't disturb you too much with our re-entry, but at any rate, I have the article that Greg sent me open because I guess it's my last chance to do it. So I will just go ahead and take a look here. This is pretty awful. I guess pretty much everything you probably imagined. St. Louis County Health Director says, I was assaulted, called... I don't even know exactly what this is. They blank out part of the word that he was called, and I don't know what. I mean, I got some guesses because they give you the first letter, but it's like nothing would make any sense here. Oh, there would be something to make sense, but I doubt very much that that's what he was called. I was assaulted and called a brown blank, and it was C word, a brown C blank after mask plea. And I mean, the only thing that, like, what comes to mind? Brown blank, that's a C word, like brown cow. Now that's not what you probably were being called, although I suppose it's possible that they thought, well, he might be from India and that might be insulting to call him a cow, but in fact wouldn't be insulting. But you get the idea. I don't know. So I'm sure it was something vulgar, but like, and I guess because he's Indian, his skin is darker, so brown, but I mean, I don't know. It doesn't make any sense, but these people are not about making sense. So, all right, editor's note up at the top here says that Dr. Faisal Khan, acting director, acting, I didn't realize he was an acting director, but an acting director of the St. Louis County Department of Public Health, spoke in favor of a mask mandate, he should have said directive, on Tuesday night during a city council meeting. On Wednesday, he wrote a letter to Council Chair Rita Hurd Days describing his experience. That's her name, Rita Hurd Days. It's bizarre when people have names like that. They're normal-ish names, but Rita Hurd Days what? Okay. Rita Hurd, Heard, Days, Days. Describing his experience during and after his comments. The full letter is posted below. You only have one chance to read it. Here it is. Dear Chairwoman Days, I appreciated the opportunity to share the latest data, scientific research, and public health advice with the County Council last night. Although I guess he doesn't know what the point was anymore. As I mentioned in my letter on Monday, the latest public health order regarding masks is an important disease transmission mitigation strategy necessary to slow the spread of the coronavirus, especially as the much more contagious Delta variant is now the dominant variant in Missouri and in our region. As director of the Department of Public Health, acting really, it is incumbent upon me to offer the best public health guidance I can, and that is what I endeavored to do last night and got punished for, apparently. After completing my medical training, I chose to focus my work on public health. And that's an interesting thing all by itself, too, right? How many people are going to continue to do that? There was a wave of new and interested students interested in studying public health at the beginning. And now that you see that you only end up getting death threats, I wonder if that's going to last. But I don't know what kind of ability the students have to transfer out of that program, given the way most medical schools are structured. Anyway, after completing my medical training, I chose to focus my work on public health. I have committed myself over my entire 25-year career to improving health status indicators for entire communities, particularly in the most vulnerable segments of society. To which, Republicans say, boo, that's the problem. That's why we hate you. We don't see color. We just hate people who help people whose color is described to us by those who do see it, I guess. I can hear color just fine. Anyway, I have worked to improve public health around the world, including Australia, Vietnam, Pakistan, South Africa, the People's Republic of China, boo, you hear the Republicans saying, Zimbabwe, Botswana, and the United States. And at first, Republicans will say, yeah, USA, and then they realize when he adds parenthetically, that means West Virginia, Massachusetts, and Missouri. What it means is, yeah, he's working to improve public health in backwaters where people have no access to health care and are instead, camping out at fairgrounds for remote area medical installations, right? Remote area medical treatment encampments where people can actually see a doctor for once because our system has left them without. All right, anyway, I have been a proud citizen of the United States since 2013. And by the way, the day he was naturalized, Republicans waved flags and said, yay, this is the model of how you should do things, right? All the things that you're supposed to do. I'm not against immigrants. I'm against illegal immigrants. I think they should wait their turn. All right, I'll wait my turn, whatever that means, and do it the legal way. All right, yeah, but now you're telling me to wear a mask, so boo, go back to Pakistan or wherever it is you're from. Isn't that nice? They're so sincere. In all that time and in all those places, I have never been subjected to the racist, xenophobic, and threatening behavior that greeted me in the county council meeting last night. And that's Trumpism for you. Trump made people proud to be openly loudmouthed and racist and xenophobic. That's the big problem with the guy. Anyway, my time before the council began with a dog whistle question from Councilman Tom Fitch. So it came from the council, not just the audience, who said he wanted to emphasize for the assembled crowd that I was not from this country. As you know, and I guess here I just wanted to make another comment. That, by the way, I guess when you treat your public health people like this, I mean, Dr. Action, Dr. Amy Acton from Ohio, right? She's from this country, born and raised here, no problems with that, but they still threatened her and, protested outside of her house and all sorts of things. And now I'm wondering whether at some point, does public health become another one of those jobs Americans just won't fill, and you'll have to have doctors from other countries who may or may not be naturalized citizens filling those roles? I'm just curious about that because it's certainly made it an unattractive position to be in. But at any rate, so blame for Councilman Tim Fitch there in St. Louis, who said he wanted to emphasize to the crowd that Dr. Khan was not from this country. Naturalized citizen, but hey, who cares? As you know, and as Mr. Fitch surely knew since he was the crowd's leader, the great majority of the people in the raucous crowd appeared to be from the MAGA movement, as evidenced by their Trump 2024 chants. That's what they're doing in the St. Louis County Council, chanting about the presidential race 3 years away. The MAGA movement is well known for xenophobia and discriminatory treatment of racial minorities, and has engaged in violent acts against government institutions like in our nation's capital on January 6th. What he's telling you is that it's a terrorist organization, and you should get used to thinking of it that way. You and I do, but the rest of the country still thinks it's just a bunch of people having, just being enthusiastic about their support for one of the two major parties in the United States, which by definition cannot be extremist because it's one of the two majors. So there you go. It's definitely not extremist, even though Dems are in disarray and are always extremist, and extreme left, socialism, Hitler, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I later saw that around the time that Mr. Fitch asked his question, his friend Mark McCloskey, who was seated right behind me and situated near Mr. Fitch's position on the dais, posted on social media that mask mandates are, quote, un-American. One cannot help but see the connection between the efforts of Mr. McCloskey and Mr. Fitch to stoke xenophobia against me. I'm sure you are aware that Mr. McCloskey, like Mr. Fitch, is a well-known MAGA movement figure. In line with Councilman Fitch's incendiary comments and Mr. McCloskey's social media post, several audience members then started mocking my accent when I was presenting to the council. I heard people doing their impersonation of Apu, the caricature character, from the Simpsons television show that mocks people from South Asia, such as myself. While I was presenting my analysis of COVID-19 to the council, two politicians, Mr. McCloskey and Paul Berry, seated right behind me, consistently berated me and tried to distract me from my presentation. Was he giving his presentation from his seat in the audience? Or was he up on the dais and McCloskey and Berry also had seats behind him? I don't know. I'm curious about how the whole thing was laid out. I guess it sort of makes a difference. But anyway, when I asked you, the chairwoman, to intervene to prevent Mr. McCloskey and Mr. Berry from interfering with my presentation, you lectured me, not them. Such demeaning treatment was surprising to me, as I had heard that you were sensitive to issues of race and treating people equitably. I'm curious now, who invited him to give this briefing? And where was that person in terms of standing up to defend him? But I don't know. After my presentation was completed, maybe she invited him for the purpose of berating him. I guess that's a possibility I hadn't entertained. After my presentation was completed, I tried to leave the chamber, because obviously people want me gone, right? But I was confronted by several people who were in the aisle. On more than one occasion, I was shoulder bumped and pushed. As I approached the exit and immediately outside the chambers, I became surrounded by the crowd in close quarters, where members of the crowd yelled at me, calling me and now we find out what the C word is here, a fat brown, and the C word that they decided, it doesn't make any sense here, but if you're censoring a C word, it's the one you probably thought it was. Although, as we mentioned, this doctor is a man, and typically you, in the United States anyway, you might throw this one at a woman instead. Now, there's a C word you could call a man that would make somewhat more sense, just anatomically speaking, but that's not what they chose. Instead, they went with the other one, which is actually makes me wonder about whether or not the person who said that is an American citizen. Because, quite honestly, that's something you find in the British Commonwealth countries more often than here when referring to people, regardless, I guess, of their gender. But isn't that interesting? A fat brown, there you go. And a brown bastard as well. Lots of brown being thrown around here. After being physically assaulted, called racist slurs, and surrounded by an angry mob, I expressed my displeasure. That's true. By using my middle finger toward an individual who had physically threatened me and called me racist slurs. So, who could blame him, right? Political operatives and even Mr. Fitch himself have sought to use my instinctive reaction as political fodder against me. I would like to think that I would not react like that because it risks creating a distraction from what should be a consensus around masking and vaccines. I have to say, however, that when faced with the racist vitriol that Councilman Fitch has been privately and publicly stoking against me since my appointment, I cannot say I am sorry. I remain open and willing to brief the council on public health issues, surprisingly enough, dealing with COVID-19 and the other important challenges we face in public health in St. Louis County. I simply ask that you take appropriate steps to investigate these matters, prevent similar events from happening in the future, and ensure that a safe and orderly environment be created for any future testimony me or my staff are asked to provide to the council. Sincerely, Faisal Khan. That's the end of that. Wow. So some episode. And by the way, his reaction with the middle finger, much more American than the invective that was hurled at him. I mean, it's an American thing to curse at people, even elected or high-level appointed officials. But I don't know, man. Cursing at them like you're in some kind of a Guy Ritchie movie doesn't make any particular sense. But there you have it. Speaking of yelling and screaming and cursing, I have news from The Hill that runs under the headline, Trump blows fuse over GOP moving forward with infrastructure deals. So anything that makes him upset is fun news for me. Former President Trump lashed out at Senate Republicans on Thursday after the upper chamber voted to take up debate on a bipartisan infrastructure package, accusing Minority Leader Mitch McConnell and rhinos of surrendering to Democrats. And I guess the fact that he did it Thursday means he was asleep when it happened, or uninterested, or was chatting with people over dinner at Pervalago, and when he woke up in the morning, then he was reminded, oh yeah, I'm mad at Republicans in the Senate. Under the weak leadership of Mitch McConnell, Senate Republicans continue to lose. He lost Arizona, like you did. He lost Georgia. He ignored election fraud, and he doesn't fight. That's interesting. But that's actually, I was going to say, maybe I won't bother reading his statement, because why publicize it? But this is interesting. So McConnell, he says, lost Arizona. But he won Arizona, even though he lost Arizona. I guess you could say he's referring to the Arizona Senate seats, but the top of the ticket lost in Arizona. He denies that that's the case. But I guess, in Trump's mind, it's easy to believe that he believes that he won Arizona, but the two Senate races in Arizona actually lost, as opposed to, well, there was massive fraud and it was up and down the ballot. It was only fraud against me. Everything else is Mitch McConnell's fault, and was the actual correct result. I wonder whether do the Arizona Senate candidates, I don't know, because they kind of went away. Do they support his claim? How do they feel about the fraud, for instance? That'd be an interesting inquiry. I can't even remember who the candidates were. And one of them was a sitting senator up until she was defeated by, what's his name? Which of the, I can't even remember now, all our Arizona, Mark, the astronaut guy, and Gifford's husband. All right, well, at any rate, man, why can't I think of these guys? Anyway, I thought that would be an interesting inquiry as to whether or not Mark Kelly, there we go, whether or not his opponent, and remember, I can't even remember who it was that occupied the seat before him. She had lost the race the last time and got appointed by the senator. You remember who I'm talking about, but for some reason I can't. My mind is a blank, and it's good. I kind of like it that way. So, Martha McSally, is that it? Yeah, okay. Anyway, I guess I'd be curious to know how she feels about the audit, the fraud, and the idea that it's Trump's opinion that her loss was legitimate, but his was not. I wonder about that, because I wouldn't be surprised if McSally joined in supporting his claims, thinking, well, if he succeeds in overturning the election in Arizona, maybe they'll succeed in overturning my loss in Arizona too, only to be, of course, thrown under the bus immediately because Trump is so mad at Mitch McConnell that he needs to be able to blame McConnell for legitimately losing that Senate race, and but still preserve his own claims. I'm just curious about that. I don't know whether poking around would bear that out, but since we're live on the air, we won't have time to do that, but I might do that after the show and think about it for tomorrow. All right, moving on to other fun topics. As I mentioned, there was reporting from the Daily Beast about the day the masks returned to Congress. Yelling, throwing, tweeting. The day masks returned to Congress is the title of Sam Brody's piece in the Daily Beast. Let's run through it. Take a look. Hours into the return of a face mask requirement in the House of Representatives on Wednesday, Representative Lauren Boebert threw a mask at a Democratic staffer. A Democrat and a Republican got in several shouting matches, a Democrat and a Republican, I guess, in repeated shouting matches about the Republicans' vaccination status off the floor, and the Speaker of the House called her GOP counterpart a moron for criticizing mask guidance. Sounds fun. And that was all before lunch. A very important metric in Washington. What happens before versus after lunch. Later on in the day, Democrats continued to stoke the fire by lobbing social media bombs at their mask-resistant GOP colleagues. Tired of their lame asses, tweeted Representative Mark Pocan of Wisconsin. Nice. All right. Republicans, meanwhile, grilled the Capitol's top physician over why he advised a return to the masking requirement. Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy came to his own conclusion that the decision was motivated by Democrats' desire to, quote, keep you living in fear with your mask even if you've been vaccinated, unquote. In the process of making that argument, he also managed to throw in a suggestion that Speaker Nancy Pelosi is corrupt, because why not? Just toss it in there. As public health authorities and U.S. CDC dust off mask mandates amid the spread of the Delta variant, members of Congress might theoretically be expected to model good behavior at a challenging time for the nation. But 16 months of corrosive pandemic politics have rendered the U.S. Capitol a uniquely toxic environment when it comes to COVID precautions. It's especially the case in the House, where virus skeptics and conspiracists in the GOP flaunted and mocked public health guidance, even as dozens of their colleagues fell sick or even died from the virus. That is true. They're, 2 dead, right? And they're both Republican, by the way. Poisoning relationships with Democrats and turning the chamber into the physical equivalent of an angry Facebook comment thread. So, when the mask requirement returned after a brief post-vaccine respite, the conditions were ripe for a successive series of dramatic blow-ups and raw expressions of anger and disbelief. It made for an ironic split screen on Capitol Hill as the Senate closed in on a landmark bipartisan infrastructure deal. House members berated each other and Republicans ground the chamber to a halt in protest. Boebert, the hard-right freshman Republican, began the day by flinging a mask at a staffer who offered her one on the House floor. Whatever happened to just politely, no thank you. According to a person who witnessed the exchange, the Congresswoman later posted on Twitter about a, quote, Democrat staffer who tried to hand me that face muzzle, unquote, and deployed a GIF from the Pixar film Monsters Incorporated, Monsters, Inc., to endorse the rejection of masks. I don't see it here. I wonder which clip it, here's the embedded tweet. I'm kind of curious whether does it have it in this tweet or in the following? There's no chain here. I don't know. I don't think I have the patience to scroll through Lauren Boebert's timeline to see what clip from Monsters, Inc. she thinks might have endorsed the idea of rejecting face masks. Then, Representative Chip Roy of Texas gave an outraged speech on the House floor, sans mask, in which he vowed to shut this place down if the requirement stood. And I don't think that the mask mandate, even at this point, covers having the mask on necessarily while you're speaking. I still think you're able to take the mask off to speak. If not, then what are we supposed to make of Tim Ryan making his own speech? I don't know if it's mentioned in this piece or not, but he also gave an impassioned speech about the mask mandate and the impropriety of fighting over it, but he was not wearing a mask while he did it, so I have my questions about that. So Chip Roy makes his threats and says we'll shut the place down. We are absolutely sick and tired of this, and so are the American people. They are, but not of what you think this is. Roy subsequently forced a vote on adjourning the House, the procedural equivalent of pulling the fire alarm in high school, a stunt that was later replicated by Representative Jody Hice of Georgia, gumming up the works of the House for the morning. That's usually Marjorie Taylor Greene's trick. Roy, we did that one. There's support for that general idea among Roy's colleagues to continue doing this. Representative Dan Crenshaw arrived at the House floor and was overheard by the Daily Beast telling a Democratic colleague that he wanted to oppose any bipartisan piece of legislation as long as the childish mask mandate stood. So now his position is, here's how I'll do my job. I will vote against anything that has support from both parties as long as people are supposed to wear masks so that we don't get one another sick and kill any more of our colleagues, which has already happened twice. Weird. Democrats say they don't want to go back to masks either, but after a year of dutiful adherence to mask rules, they say it's a small protective measure to adopt at this point, and they blame unvaccinated COVID skeptics for dragging pandemic progress backward and forcing the move. And in this sense, they have done so correctly. That anger was enough to compel one Democrat, Representative Jared Huffman of California, to personally confront Representative Byron Donalds, another with the... There's more two first name people in the Republican conference than I can make any particular sense of. At least there's an S in the end of Donald. But Byron Donalds, and Chip Roy for that matter, during... where was I? So Jared Huffman confronts Byron Donalds during votes on Wednesday morning. Donalds, a freshman Republican who previously said on cable news that he has declined the vaccine due to past COVID infection, which is not an actual thing, walked to the floor unmasked. Huffman refused to get into an elevator with Donalds. A moment later, outside the House floor, Huffman yelled at Donalds that he was selfish. Donalds shot back to Huffman, "Mind your business," as aides, reporters, and lawmakers stood nearby, taken aback at the scene. The two later continued their verbal scuffle outside on the House steps and then kept trading blows on Twitter for good measure. And I guess some of them are embedded here for your reviewing pleasure. I'll skip them for now. Huffman, who tweeted earlier in the day that he expected Republicans to throw tantrums over the guidance, may have gone further than most of his colleagues would have, but he was far from the only one tired of putting up with some Republicans' resistance to masking and vaccines, even those who pride themselves on bipartisan outreach. None of us are happy with having to wear masks, said Representative Dean Phillips. There's a Democrat in the Democratic caucus with two first names, Dean Phillip, from Minnesota, a member of the Bipartisan Problem Solvers Caucus. That must be it. If you have the two first names and you're a Democrat, you're going to be a Problem Solvers Caucus kind of guy. And if more Americans would get vaccinated and listen to science instead of conspiracy theorists, including certain members of Congress, we could save lives, improve our economy, and probably not be subject to such requirements. Very even-handed, and they threw the economy in there for extra good conservative measure. Phillips told the Daily Beast that he was deeply concerned, like Susan Collins. See, no wonder he's in the Problem Solvers Caucus. He's deeply concerned for the steadily eroding environment of collegiality in the House. There isn't such an environment, but I get what you mean. The lack of basic human decency being exhibited in the House is a stain on our country, he said in a text message. Simple solution, all caps here, wear your frickin' mask like the rest of us. Well, that's not particularly civil, but you get the point. Even the people who pride themselves on their civility are losing their temper. Donalds, for his part, said the problem was that Democrats weren't respecting his position, even if the position was concerning the risk of contagious disease. That's the issue we're having. People aren't respecting other people's position, and that's a problem for our country, Donalds said. When people get upset and get tense, then arbitrariness and foolishness rules the day. My goodness. Well, there's only a paragraph or two left here, but we won't cram it in before this break. See you next.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning show here on Netroots Radio. Let's see. Oh, look at this. I just happened to see go by The Hill tweeting a quote from Kevin McCarthy. CDC has become a political arm of the administration. It now wants to control every element of our lives. It wants to control, of course, you wearing a mask. That's one element of your life. But, you know, something, every element, yada, yada, yada. I'm sure that makes a whole lot of sense to somebody. Just not me. All right. Well, like I said, 2 sentences or so left from this Daily Beast piece, but then they don't seem to make mention of Tim Ryan's speech on the floor, so maybe I will. For those caught in the middle, they are concluding, there was little else to do but soak in the bad vibes. Representative Chuck Fleischman, a Republican of Tennessee, an early vaccine proponent who was wearing a mask off the House floor, didn't have much vitriol to offer toward Democrats or anyone. I'm sad just to see the reemergence of COVID nationwide, Fleischman said. I thought we were over it. It's just a bit depressing. Well, there you go. There has to be something going on in his mind. Anyway, early vaccine proponent. I wonder if that had anything to do with the fact that Dolly Parton was an early backer of the vaccine herself. That happens also to be, that comes up in the next item down the scroll on the Daily Beast homepage. And although it's about Dolly Parton, I don't know if it has to do with COVID or not. I guess so. Yeah, according to the subheader. Does Dolly Parton know what's happening at her stampede? Which may or may not make sense to all of you, but in case it doesn't, the Dolly Parton Stampede, it's a like a dinner theater restaurant, at least it is in the Myrtle Beach, South Carolina area, and I imagine that they have a similar installation in the Nashville area. And I guess I don't know. This one is a members only story. They're not going to let me see it, but I guess what's going on here, according to the subheader, she helped fund a COVID-19 vaccine, but her theater is telling callers that masks are optional in a town where the virus is still killing. I mean, maybe the least important possible angle on a Dolly Parton story on COVID-19, which isn't even itself typically a very important angle on COVID, but there it is. Just thought I'd throw that one in there. And we'll see, maybe what's his name here, Chuck Fleischman will find himself shifting with the rest of Tennessee and become less of a vaccine supporter. as time goes on. I don't think I put anything away in Pocket about Tim Ryan's speech, but I did comment on it yesterday. So if I scroll through my own Twitter feed, I'm sure I'll find it. And it wasn't, like a fantastic speech or anything. It was just sort of impassioned. He was just, venting about just tired of being surrounded by stupid, childish people who are protesting the mask thing. The quote that got called out in the tweets about it was Ryan saying, just stop with this craziness. We're trying to be safe. We're trying to protect our family members. And the minority leader mocks that. He was very upset with McCarthy mocking both the idea that people needed to be masked, and he was also very upset with their attacks, Republican attacks, on the attending physician of the U.S. Congress, which he points out, he's the one they all run to for free or nearly free health care. Whenever they were, when they needed their vaccines, they ran to him. When they, if they need aspirin, whatever they need antibiotics, they're coming down with something. They run off to the attending physician for all of that. But now, to score some political points, they're attacking him, even though they'll go back to him, next time they need anything medical. Anyway, I just thought it was interesting. And he points out, somebody, the start of his speech is, somebody here represents the hot spots, right? So somebody is in this chamber all the time for the votes who has been going home to one of the hot spot regions, or all of the hot spot regions, and then traveling back here and possibly bringing the virus with them. And the rest of us are just trying to get along and do our jobs and not get sick. But, many of us now, we go back to our families with whatever it is that you're carrying with you when you come back from one of these hot spots. And I pass it on to other people, on to constituents, on to my family members. Maybe I have an immune-compromised child at home. And he was, making this point, although, he could have been even more incensed about the things. I certainly was. I mean, I got to thinking, maybe how long is this clip? It's 2 minutes and 20 seconds. And it's not, like I said, it's not that awesome a speech or anything. It's just, he makes a couple of good points. But I thought the best point that he had was, somebody represents the hot spots. There's definitely somebody. That's why we have more strict rules and why we're one of the first ones to adopt the mask mandate, is because we are a group of people that by necessity represent every area in the country. So wherever the hot spot is, one of us is from. It's not like, random luck of the draw. Well, at least none of us happen to be from blah, blah, blah hot spot. One of us is from that hot spot and may have been there within the last couple of days. And if you have an immune compromised person at home, a kid, think about just, I don't know, you want to tug at the heartstrings, right? You could have a pediatric cancer patient in your family who you're trying to protect. So that's why you got the vaccine. But that doesn't help if somebody brings Delta variant into the building and passes it on to you and you're asymptomatic. But has the child been able to get vaccinated at all? And even if they have been able to get vaccinated, it doesn't guarantee you that you won't get pretty seriously ill if you really have a super compromised immune system. And God help you if you have that, plus the inability to get the vaccine for whatever reason, your age or the immune problems that you're having, right? So I was just thinking, and if you really play that out in your mind, right? And think about, what if you were serving in Congress and you had one of your children was battling pediatric cancer, and you're doing everything you can to fight every day of your life to give your child a chance to survive, but somebody from a place where it's politically popular to mock mask mandates comes back into your building with the Delta variant, passes it on to you, and it, thank God, doesn't sicken you seriously because you've had the vaccine, but then you carry it home. Can you imagine fighting every day and fighting through chemotherapy and radiation treatment and whatnot and surgeries and hospitalizations, only to, as you're approaching the possibility of finally beating the cancer, to have the child die of COVID? think about that. Like, what would that do to you? Like, he's just saying, well, please wear your mask. I'm telling you, if I'm in, I never make it to Congress because I can't deal with issues like this in the way that you're supposed to. Maybe under normal circumstances I'd be able to do it, but suppose that happens to you, right? You have a child suffering from cancer. They're about to beat the cancer, maybe after X years of battling day in and day out, and your child contracts the Delta variant or any variant of COVID and dies because somebody was careless and reckless in carrying it back to your place of work. Forget, well, you better wear your mask. Tell me you wouldn't want to push that MFer down a flight of stairs if you happen to find yourself behind him on the way down a marble staircase, right? It's remarkable that they're able to restrain themselves to please wear your mask, and if you don't, you're fined $500. And quite honestly, every single one of those Republicans would have the exact same reaction if that happened to their child. But, it didn't, so we'll mock you in the meantime. So, and that's what you're saying. As I was tweeting about it yesterday, that's what you're saying. When you flout the mask rules in that room, given that everybody in that room is represents every corner of the country, what's happening is you're saying that you feel free to make your colleagues that distraught and that mad that they would push you down a flight of stairs, throw you down an elevator shaft. Why? Because the virus is microscopic, right? It provides you with an ability to duck culpability for it. And then in your mind, you Republicans, it's okay for you to risk the death of your colleagues' children because no one's going to be able to prove that it was you. You can't pin it on me. You don't know for sure that I was the one that... Yes. What if there was a way to actually trace that? And there is a way. And in order to do it, thoroughly and prevent something from happening, you'd be testing everybody all the time. They wouldn't submit to this testing. You could be tracing the genetic mutations, etc., and making sure but you should be able to identify that. But if you could nail it down, and hypothetically, Marjorie Trader Greene refuses to wear a mask, refuses to get vaccinated, comes back with the Delta variant, whatever, she's asymptomatic, passes it on to you. You're asymptomatic because you've been vaccinated. It goes home, kills the children in your family, right? And you come back. If you had the proof, would you not smash her face in and face the consequences of that? Or at the very least, let's say you're actually civilized enough to say, well, I just can't stoop to that level. Well, you'd be suing her ass off. Something, right? But the nature of the virus is such that it allows everybody, but in particular, for these purposes, the people like this who are mask deniers and anti-vaxxers, the ability to risk the lives of your children with impunity. You can never prove it was me. That's a pretty amazing stance to take. And I would be surprised if there were parents out there who, if they actually suffered that kind of incomprehensible loss because of their recklessness of their colleagues, would probably feel like they would risk a lot to teach a very particular lesson to these very particular people. But you can't trace it like that. Not ordinarily. And so it's just an interesting phenomenon. That's giving license to the Republicans to say, F it, for political purposes. Yes, I absolutely will gamble with the lives of your children and spit in your face if you ask me not to, because you can't prove it was me. That's the whole thing. That's the only thing that's underlying it. If it was obvious, if it was traceable, they'd never do it. That's, I think, where you'd finally find the limits of Republican shamelessness. I still think they might actually not do these things if it was possible to, without a doubt, trace the provenance of the virus and you were able to hang it on them. But, I guess you wouldn't have to, because you just end up throwing them in jail for murder. But whatever. I don't know. It struck me as a interesting thought experiment. Not that any Republicans are likely to conduct any of those either. They don't believe in that science either. All right. Let's see. Other things I thought it might be worth sharing with you. Charlie Kirk got himself in the news the other day for his latest nonsense. Washington Post reporting Charlie Kirk's pro-Trump youth group stokes vaccine resistance as COVID surges again. And by the way, as it is surging among younger patients, apparently doctors around the country marveling at, they're not surprised by it because I think it's explainable given that we vaccinated the elderly first and that most of the people who are resisting the vaccine are younger in age. But yeah, lots of patients of outside of the age groups we initially saw hardest hit by COVID, not only getting sick, but I guess with the Delta variant in circulation, getting sicker than anybody used to. But just coincidence that Charlie Kirk is trying to move the younger crowd to this. By the way, anyway, his focus at the moment, because he's into campus activism, even though he's like 27 and should stop hanging around campuses. And at this point, security at whatever campus he happens to be visiting should be watching him as, it's kind of weird that this late 20s guy keeps hanging around campus for so long and saying, I just want to meet with the kids. I just want to rap with the youth of today. Anyway, Turning Point USA and its affiliates, I'll read you the subheader here, are urging students to resist mandates and spreading baseless claims about medical raids as part of a bid for donations. So as they're doing the grift thing, but it's of particular interest because now kids getting ready to return to campus. I know my own son getting ready to return to campus had to produce his vaccine record before he'll be admitted back onto campus and certainly given any university housing. And that's the case in a lot of places, and I think it'll end up being pretty universal. But apparently Turning Point USA is interested in instructing their activists how to evade the vaccine requirements and how to instruct others to do the same. I don't think they have a very effective program of it. And so what they'll do is they'll tell impressionable young kids that if they just recite this script, they can get around it and then go on with their college lives without having to subject themselves to the vaccine. And I don't think that's actually true. I think what they tell them will just get them into a confrontation and thrown out. And they'll be, I guess, prospective plaintiffs for a lawsuit. But I don't think they'll win the lawsuit and they'll interrupt their college careers. But who cares? Throw them under the bus. All right. Isaac Stanley Becker. Another two first names here. Reporting this one for the Washington Post, a young emergency room doctor stood before dozens of students in a Tampa convention center this month and gave them a script for resisting coronavirus vaccines. But just setting the scene for you again, an indoor gathering in the hottest hot spot in the country, Florida, for young, unvaccinated vaccine resistors that will teach them to go out and proselytize to other vaccine hesitant or anti-vaccine people about how they too should avoid the vaccine. But again, like I said, it's a neutron bomb for morons. They'll be killing Republicans at a much higher rate. I think I'll join Greg in saying don't seed the 2022 elections just yet. There may be too many dead Republicans come November 2022 for them to be able to take full advantage of their voter suppression regimes. Anyway, so the doctor is telling them, giving them a script for resisting coronavirus vaccines. And here's the script. You say, I'm 18 years old. I have no health conditions. Based on the 5-year mortality data, this is a quote, I have a highly likelihood of dying from flu versus COVID, and I don't get the flu vaccine, so I'm not going to get this one. Sean Oschenbein, a 33-year-old attending physician who never learned English grammar in Johnson, Tennessee, told students gathered for a summit hosted by the conservative youth group Turning Point USA, according to a recording of the session obtained by the Washington Post. Drop the mic. You're done. That's it. Drop the mic, youth of today. Hello, fellow kids. Want to have a funky, fresh rap with me, the OG of vaccine resistance, a 33-year-old guy. Just connecting. So, by the way, I mean, not only does he make the grammatical mistake, okay, fine, maybe he meant, based on the 5-year mortality data, I have a higher likelihood, and maybe he even said higher likelihood and it was a typo. I have a higher likelihood of dying from the flu versus COVID, and I don't get the flu vaccine, so I'm not going to get this one. They address in the next paragraph or two the fact that, no, by the way, you don't actually have a higher likelihood of dying from the flu versus COVID at age 18, but, why would you expect Dr. Oschenbein to understand or truthfully tell them anything about that? But aside from that mistake and the grammatical mistake, again, this is the script, right, for how to get around the coronavirus vaccine mandate at your school. You show up, they say, are you vaccinated? You say, no. They say, well, then get off campus. And you say, aha, but I'm 18 years old. I have no health conditions. Based on the 5-year mortality data, I have a higher likelihood of dying from flu versus COVID, and I don't get the flu vaccine, so I'm not going to get this one. At which point they say, get off campus. I mean, what is that supposed to do for you? You say that, I'm 18 years old. Of course you're 18 years old. I understand that. I know that. That's how generally speaking, that's the kind of person we admit to college. They're 18. Some of them are younger. Some of them are older. But what does that matter? I have no health conditions. Right. Now you don't. That's congratulations. Good news. Based on the 5-year mortality data, I actually think the opposite of what is true. Problem. Yes. But even if you were right, I'm sorry. My instructions are these. If you haven't gotten the coronavirus vaccine, then you're out of here. I know, but I'm 18 and I'll repeat the script no, I'm sorry. None of that is of interest to me. I mean, it would be an interesting comment to make in the policy making, the decision making process for the university when they were deciding whether or not they would in fact require the coronavirus vaccine. But at this point, the decision's been made. The policy is that you've got to have it. I'm asking you whether you have it. You say you don't, and then you offer me these uninteresting side arguments. Get the F out of here. Well, that presentation is just one way the group led by Charlie Kirk, 27 and should be thrown off campus, has recently sought to rally young people against vaccine mandates. Text messages announcing Kirk as their author, no one is really sure whether he really writes them, warn that President Biden is, quote, sending goons, all caps, door to door to make you take the COVID-19 vaccine, which he's not. But it brings in money. Facebook ads from Kirk's tax-exempt nonprofit insist the government has, all caps, no right to force you to inject yourself with an experimental vaccine. You don't inject yourself, of course, but whatever. And say the best response to outreach about the shot is to, quote, all caps, lock your doors, kids, 2 exclamation points. These statements stand on a slew of falsehoods and mischaracterizations. According to vaccine experts, at least 400 people 18 and under have died of COVID-19 in the United States, making the virus more lethal than the flu, said Paul Offit, director of the Vaccine Education Center at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. The coronavirus also carries the risk of an inflammatory syndrome that can affect the lungs, heart, and kidneys of children and young adults. Federal health authorities recommend the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine for children as young as 12. Any reasonable person who looks at the data would conclude the safer choice is to get the vaccine, Offit said. However, we've brought you this guy instead, who says if you just tell them you're 18 and then give them a false fact, they'll, I don't know what, let you go, give you ice cream. No idea what they'll do for you. But the communications by Turning Point USA and its affiliate Turning Point Action reflect The increasingly hard line taken by the group, which describes itself as the largest and fastest growing youth organization in America, which it probably isn't, and claims a presence on more than 2,500 college and high school campuses. Its dire warnings about a government-backed inoculation program, now a major theme of its Facebook ads, which have been viewed millions of times, illustrate how the Trump-allied group is capitalizing on the stark polarization around vaccine policy. Experts say the messages, many of which steer online audiences to donation pages, threaten to undermine vaccine confidence among young people who have already proved particularly reluctant to roll up their sleeves, and they could incite conflict over vaccine requirements as students return to campuses, wrestling with how to safely reopen this fall, with some battling in court to require vaccination. I don't know who's still fighting that battle, but there is a linked story about it in case you'd like to find out some of the examples. The input from Turning Point USA is, quote, not so much about the particular topic as having a politically divisive social issue that can rally the troops, said Kevin G. Wellner, director of the National Education Policy Center at the University of Colorado at Boulder. That's .edu, just in case I throw that in there. Well, all these long names for the schools. That's unfortunate for any issue, but when we're talking about life and death, it's particularly troubling to me. It is unfortunate about any issue. It's particularly troubling to me, by the way, that you are taking the kids who are embarking on a quest for education and miseducating them, and then miseducating them into finding a way to get themselves booted off of campus and never be able to return. Or at least, at any rate, they'll be interrupting their education, which is exactly what they don't want, but there you have it. Anyway, it goes on. There's quite a bit more to the article. You should read it for yourself. Just get some sense of what they're doing out there. They have a whole, somebody gives a anti-Fauci speech. Robert Kennedy Jr. makes appearances at their things. So there you have it, in case you were ever wondering whether or not he's completely lost it and flipped over to literally to the Republican side, not just the anti-vax side, like as a Democrat who's anti-vax, but he's hanging out with Turning Point USA. Not a lot of room for doubt there. All right, so you should go ahead and read that. Just wanted to sort of bring that up because I know a lot of you have some interest in that. You have people in your family, either immediate family or extended family, returning to campuses. And that's important to you to know what's going on with those things. All right, getting close to the end here for today. Let me squeeze in one other mini story here because there's just a minute or two left. I thought you might be interested in hearing about this one. Again, caught my attention on Twitter because it was The Hill tweeting it around with a nice picture, and that usually stops me. Cameron Jenkins reporting on this interesting tale. Muslim-free gun range closes in Oklahoma. We may even have mentioned this when they opened up back in the day, making a stink over stupid things and trying to market their xenophobia. A gun range in Oklahoma saying you can come here and we won't allow Muslims because something. Even though what would be the danger? Everybody in here is armed and trained, and you can certainly stand your ground against Muslim terrorists. That's the whole point of this thing. But why invite them? I guess that made a certain amount of sense to them. Owners, though, of an Oklahoma gun range that once claimed to be Muslim-free, I don't know if they ever tried to make a go of it with Muslims being allowed, have announced that they will be selling the property after facing a lawsuit from a local Muslim resident that has lasted several years. It hasn't even been settled yet, but it ended up costing them so much money that basically they're going out of business. So good on you, whoever it was who sued them. In a Facebook post, the owners of Save Yourself Gun Club announced the sale of their 2-acre property located in Muskogee County. The business announced its closure earlier this year, telling customers that all memberships would expire in April. We thank you for being our customers and friends. It's been a pleasure, it wrote at the time. Save Yourself Gun Club first began downsizing after the lawsuit against it closed. Oh, I guess the lawsuit actually has concluded then. Leaders of a Muslim community near the gun range began celebrating the move last week. So they were seen dancing in the streets. Is that what you're saying here? Adam Soltani, director of the Council on American Islamic Relations Oklahoma chapter, shared his thoughts on the closure on Facebook. Well. What do we have here? It looks like hate does not pay after all, Soltani wrote. The same gun range we took to court in a federal lawsuit for banning Muslims by declaring itself a Muslim-free establishment is no more. The shooting range first gained national attention in 2015 when it posted a sign stating, "This privately owned business is a Muslim-free establishment. We reserve the right to refuse service to anyone. Thank you." All right, well, if you were to put that up and make the insistence that you be vaccinated to get in, that, of course, would be objectionable and they would sue you. Anyway, just so that there's some credit here, Rajai Fatiha, my best crack at the name of the local Muslim man who filed the lawsuit against the business's owners, later claimed that he was turned away when he attempted to shoot there. According to the local paper, a lawyer representing the gun range's owners said in response that Fatiha had threatened people and had come in with an agenda to create controversy. I wonder if the threat was arriving armed. How curious. Anyway, that's kind of good news. I'm glad to be able to report it. It's not a big deal, but kind of a fun one. Stay tuned for Justice Putnam next.
From networksradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right, lots more about the floor mask mandate with Justice Putnam on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy coming up next. Then also, let's see, a statue commemorating York, the enslaved black member of the Lewis and Clark expedition, toppled overnight in Portland, Oregon.